Well, I want to introduce everybody. Thank you for coming for the next edition of Carl's Corner. And our friend Steven has actually come up with some amazing page on Facebook with Philadelphia fans from this good old 64 Phillies. And we gracious to have Steve back again. And a dear friend of mine and friend of everybody's in the sports community in the Philadelphia area is our friend Sam Carchidi. Sam, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, Steve just mentioned a little bit that we were supposed to have another special guest today, but some circumstances came up. So maybe just fill in the people that are going to watch this, what actually was going on.
Well, we had scheduled Julie Betch, Johnny Callison's granddaughter, and her mom, Lori McGowan. And I actually got a text first thing in the morning from Julie asking me if we're still on. I said, yeah, we're ready to go. And then a couple hours later, she texted me that there was a family emergency with her father-in-law, and she was greatly apologetic. And I told her, don't worry about it. That's, family obviously comes first. And I said, we'll do it another time. And she graciously said she'll do it another time. So we'll get them back, and hopefully everybody's well and nothing too serious there. But as fate would have it, we've got great pinch hitter here. I mean, that's one of the things the 64 Phillies had. Lots of guys coming off the bench. Nobody comes off the bench better than Sam Carchidi.
Call me the Johnny Hernstein of this broadcast.
Well, Dan, that's the good thing is you'll have to come back on that one when we have this family on there when we talk about Callis and some of the other ones. So we're going to have you a few times on this. So where are we going to start? Because I actually forgot to play the initial one about the feel. We were barely 9, 10, 11 years old back in the day. Radio was a big part of our life, but then also sports got into our life. And then it was an amazing situation. So I'm just going to show this and actually maybe have a feel about radio was our life. TV was just black and white, but just this little feel.
Ready to go on. Here's a 3-1. Curve. There's a long drive. It's really hit the left. Way back Johnson. He's near the wall. He's got it. It's started out like a home run. Just a big out. Bennett to the top of the stretch. He delivers. Here is a smash up the middle for a big hit. It's through. Started out. It's going to third. He will make it without a throw.
It's ground ball hit right back at Marichal. The throw to second. They got Gallup with a rundown. There's the throw to Hart. He's tagged out. And the throw is deflated. Taylor gets back into first safely.
There goes a ball looped to right center. That's a hit. Here comes Callison home. Covington's going to hit for the plate. Here's a throw. It's into second base. The ball game right on the line here, and for the moment, right between Bennett and Mays. Left-hander's up on the rubber now. Goes to the top of the stretch. Here's the pitch. It's over. Strike 3 balls.
Allen is flying to center and hits a 2-run homer over the center field fence. He's 1 for 2, batting .311.
Well, I don't know about you. Yeah. I still get emotional about it.
I do too. Just seeing those advertisements,
right.
Goldberg's, Peanut Chews, Penn Jersey, Alpo, Valentine, Taylor Pork Roll. I mean, it brings back memories. I mean, and Carl, I think you said it best. We just had black and white TVs back then, most of us. And when you walked into that stadium and saw the shock of the green grass, the bright red and the Phillies caps and all the colored advertisements, I mean, you were in heaven. Because, I'm talking about when you're a 9, 10-year-old kid. It just left a lasting impression.
That's what most people say, Sam. The first memory, the first thing they notice is that green grass, because nobody had color TVs. I don't think anybody on my street had a color TV.
No, only the rich people had color TVs.
That's
and
right.
There weren't many rich people in 64. And
more many rich people in Oxford Circle, that's for sure.
And just hearing the voices of By Sam and Rich Mashel and the great Bill Campbell, I mean, it just brings back so much. I mean, I could watch a lot of that.
I don't think the young kids today, their sports, it's just every game is on. It's on you can watch anytime, you can stream it, but I guess Man, they don't have now. I just have to get a personal situation. When I moved into where I'm at now, into my new nice little condo here, and I had it by myself. I didn't hook up TV for 4 months. I didn't need it. I have XM, and you know what I did, Sam? I got the Phillies schedule and listened to the Phillies games on XM with the announcers. I like, oh my God, it was like back in my childhood listening to a game on the radio.
Aren't they on delay though, Carl? Is that on delay, the XM?
It's no, not a big. It's maybe a minute or two, a couple minutes, but it's not. It's pretty much still live. It's not like tens of minutes or half hours. No, it's but it was still to hear Fransky and
Larry Anderson.
Thank you, Larry Anderson. So I would kind of got me back, and then listening to this because really I haven't heard By Sam's voice in years. We're still remember Ashburn and even Campbell, but By Sam's, it's just wow. So
yeah, radio was king, and to this day I still enjoy baseball better on the radio. I'm doing yard work, I bring the radio out, I listen to a ball game, and I just love the radio. And speaking of which, I was when you asked me to come on, I just started looking up some stuff about the '64 Phillies to jog my memory, and I'd forgotten about this. I had written this at the 50th anniversary of the '64 collapse, if you will. And a couple of days after the season ended, Bill Campbell told me that Gene Mauch called him up and said, "Can you drive me to the airport?" He was going back to California where he lived. And, Bill said, "Sure, no problem." He picks up Mauch. They start driving to the airport, and Bill had the radio on, and he's listening to the Cardinals-Yankees World Series. And that infuriated Mauch. And Mauch said, "Can we turn this off? Can we turn this stuff off?" And Bill said, "Yeah, sure." And Mauch slammed it off. He was so upset he did not want to even listen to the World Series because obviously he thought that should be us in there,
Right.
not the Cardinals, us. So just a little tidbit, the radio thing.
They were very close.
My memory, but I'd forgotten about that. But Mauch, just
They
couldn't
were
stand
very
it.
close, Bill and Gene Mauch. They used to drive together. They lived out in the same area, didn't they? And they used to drive in together.
They did, and they drove to the airport together whenever they made road trips, and they also drove into the games together. Yeah, Bill was real close. Bill, like a lot of media types in that day, says that he learned more baseball from Gene Mauch than anybody else.
Yeah,
So
that's
a common theme.
Yeah, that was in his book. He, well, of course, you wrote the book.
Well, I have to put in almost like a spiritual thing that I know we're religious people. We have our churches or synagogues you go to. But Sam, I think we were talking about Connie Mack. That was our own cathedral. When you think,
I still have a picture hanging up in my office of Connie Mack to this. That I've been.
You can see what I've got back there.
Yes. Well, Sam, if you guys could just give me a second, I want to try to see it. Now, I was fortunate enough, Sam, I did a documentary on Sam about 12 years ago about him covering the Flyers of the 2012 season. But the day we spent at his house, and they were gracious to make dinner for myself and my production guy. But then we went down to his basement, and he started digging up all his memorabilia, his books and everything. And I just want to see if I could share this screen with everybody with Sam.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been probably to 50 ballparks around the league because I covered a lot of Phillies baseball back in the day. And
here we go.
Connie Mack's still my favorite.
This is Connie Mack Stadium.
Here we go.
Because you're young and it leaves an impression.
Yeah, it's your first place.
Here we go, Sam.
1962. It was like a religious experience. My mom took me, and some kids from the neighborhood, and back then hardly anybody had a color TV. Everybody had a black and white TV. So when you went into the stadium and you saw the shot of green grass
And the color of the uniforms.
it was amazing. This is my favorite ballpark of all time. I've been fortunate enough to probably be at almost every Major League Baseball stadium, covering games for the Inquirer, and this is still my favorite. I think the first one you go to just leaves a lasting impression. But it was a great stadium. Everybody talks about Fenway Park and the Green Monster. Well, Connie Mack Stadium had a big wall in right field, and why didn't they call that the Gray Monster? It had a great scoreboard in right center field with a Longinus clock, and just a lot of nooks and crannies, different angles. And the great thing was it had bleachers in the outfield, and Richie Allen used to hit them over the bleachers and over the light tower. So to see a ball disappearing out of the stadium was just something special. So it's just a very cool stadium.
I just wanted to.
I don't know if I talked about it then, but yeah. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the scoreboard had a ledge on it, probably about 5 feet off the ground. Had a ledge that came out maybe a foot, and I saw Glenn Becker, second baseman for the Cubs, hit a ball, and I can't remember if it bounced one hop onto that ledge or if it was in the air, but it bounced. The ball was on that ledge, and it was like a ping pong ball. It bounced and bounced and bounced, and then it finally came down. But Becker circled the bases. I mean, you talk about the little nooks and crannies. You can't really see it there, but it's see where it says 22 pitcher right there. Yeah. That gray line, that right there was like a ledge, and that's where the ball could bounce. It just a little nook and cranny, and it just made the stadium that much more interesting, I think.
Yeah,
to see those numbers there too.
So Sam, tell us where we both know, but tell everybody listening where you grew up and how old you were in '64. And
yeah, I grew up in Haddon Heights, little town in Mayberry, RFD, tiny town, maybe a half hour, 40 minutes from Connie Mack, and I was 9 years old in '64, and I was the neighborhood baseball junkie, and I was fortunate. It seemed like whichever father was going to the game, including my own, if they were going to the game, they knew I would be so excited. They would take me too. So I went to tons of games, and during that year in '64, my best friend was Tommy Carchidi, who lived down the street, and his dad, Jack Carchidi, happened to cover the Phillies for the Courier Post, and he was their beat writer. So he would take us into the press box at Connie Mack. We're 9 years old. That kind of planted a seed. I wrote that in my farewell column in the Inquirer. Kind of planted a seed that if I don't make it, I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player like you guys probably did, and that soon was not the case. I soon realized that was not going to be the case. And I thought, hey, the second best thing would be writing about it. And I saw these guys, Bill Conlon and Stan Hochman and all these guys, they're watching the game. They're getting free ice cream. They're eating their ice cream as they're watching the game, free soda, free popcorn, and they're watching a game for free. And I thought, they get paid for this? And so that planted a seed. And so I owe a lot to Jack Carchidi because he introduced me to sports writing. And so I went to tons of games. I probably went to 20 to 30 games a year. Probably went into the press box only a couple times a year. But, I was a baseball junkie. I never missed a game. And I can even remember '64. I'm 9 years old. I remember being at the Haddon Heights football game on Saturday. The Phillies were off, but the Mets played the Cardinals, and they announced over the PA system at halftime, after 3 innings or whatever, St. Louis Cardinals 4, New York Mets, I'm making you score up, but the Mets were ahead. New York Mets 8 or whatever it was, and the place started roaring, and they started a "Let's Go Mets" chant, because if the Mets beat the Cardinals, I don't know if I said Reds, but it was the Cardinals. If the Mets beat the Cardinals that day, and they did, and it would go to the last day of the season. And then if the Mets beat the Cardinals on Sunday and the Phillies beat the Reds, it would have been a 3-way tie for first. And of course, the Phillies did beat the Reds 10-0. And the Mets actually had a 5-4 lead in their game and ended up losing big. They lost like 12-5, something like that. But I remember we had an old hi-fi in our living room, and I remember listening to the out-of-town game of the Mets.
You have to define what a hi-fi is, Sam. People don't know what a hi-fi is.
Big old radio. A big old radio. And I remember that's the first time I ever listened to an out-of-town game. I can't remember if it was KMOX or the Fan in New York that was even around. But I know
I used to listen, and you'd pick up some out of town games. I can remember you might get a Detroit game or
WJR out in. I was the king of that.
Red Sox, you get the Reds, the Pirates,
the Red Sox,
yeah. But anyway, I remember, and I remember I'm 9 years old crying when the Mets lost that game because the Philly season ended, and baseball meant everything to me as a 9-year-old. But I was talking to Carl before we came on, and I said, some people say that the Philly fans became dour and down and cynical after that loss, but I don't think we did because we were 9, 10 years old.
No, we didn't.
We were kids. We were kids, and to me that was such an enjoyable season, and it got me hooked on baseball. So I have a special place in my heart for that team, even though they lost.
I to this day I'm optimistic when the season begins every year when the season begins, and then I didn't get down after the first game like so many of the fans do on Facebook, but I'm always optimistic. The season didn't do anything to dampen me. I mean, I remember it. I remember it so well, and but. I think it was the night of Johnny Callison's memorial. I forget who spoke. One of his teammates spoke and said, enough of this, these last 10 games, 10-game streak, enough of that. We've got to focus on the first 150 games, which were just magical, where everything was going right. Every button that the little general pushed worked. And, let's focus on that, not on the last 12. And that's the approach I've taken since hearing that, and it's so true. I get so tired of people who just turn me off. I never listen to another game. I mean, come on. I mean, it's.
Sam, I have to interject to a point. Before we went live, you were telling me some interesting things you just dug up probably today or whatever about certain aspects of the games. Now I'm going to show a picture.
Yeah, that's Chico Ruiz stealing home, and it starts the 10-game losing streak. 2 games before, Willie Davis stole home to beat the Phillies. I mean, you can go probably 50 years and not lose a game on a steal of home. For the Phillies, it happened twice in 3 games. And I knew that. I remember that real well. This is the thing I did not remember. The second game of their 10-game losing streak, after the Ruiz game, Pete Rose stole home. So the Phillies had 3 players against them.
I didn't
either. I was just reading about it today. So they had 3 players against them steal home in a 4-game stretch. That may never have happened in baseball history.
Sam, you told me not to interrupt you there. You told me they asked Dick Sisler what he said. Asked Dick Sisler.
He was the manager, the fill-in manager for the Reds at that time.
And of course, he was the greatest hero in Philly history up till that point with that game-winning homer he hit in 1950.
Whiskey, right?
Yeah, with the Whiskers. But I remember you telling me what Dick Sisler said when they asked him, what were you thinking when Chico broke for home? And it's not politically correct these days because he had a little bit of a stutter. But you remember what you told me this story?
Well, go ahead.
Well, he said something like, he better be safe.
Right. Because Dick Sisler was actually shocked.
Yeah.
He did not have the steal sign, and he just went. Yeah, Dick Sisler was shocked, and
everybody in the ballpark was shocked. Everybody, Mark was shocked. Art Mahaffey was shocked. Clay Dalrymple, everybody.
It's just funny though to look back on things in that game. Believe it or not, in the first inning, now Gene Walk was a genius for 150 games, but he definitely pushed some wrong buttons, and in this game, he definitely did. In the first inning of that game, Tony Gonzalez gets on. Now, for those who don't remember, the Phillies lost this game 1-0. It started their 10-game losing streak. So there's only 1 run scored in the game. In the very first inning, Tony Gonzalez leads off and gets on base. The second batter, believe it or not, Richie Allen or Dick Allen comes up to the plate, and he was batting second, which sounds strange for a power hitter, but Malk liked him in the second spot a lot that year. And what did Malk have him do there? He had him bunt.
Terrible. Had him bunted.
He was successful. He bunted Gonzalez a second. Gonzalez eventually got the third with 2 outs. Did not score, though. But today, if this happened in 2024, Malk would have been crucified. Analytics and everything else. You do not bunt with your second best power hitter on the team. Callison was number 1, Allen number 2. You don't bunt there in the first inning. Even if Allen makes an out, it's not a big deal, but you have to have him swing away, and he can hit one in the gap, and it may have changed the whole game around. But, it's just interesting because the game and Gene Malk were all about small ball back then. But I don't really remember it. I read about this, and I don't really remember that game specifically, but, if you have a power hitter who ended up 29 home runs that year and just was electrifying in each at bat, you do not bunt in the first.
He hit two in the last game.
Yep.
But I should remember who was pitching for the Reds that game. But you would bunt in that situation if you expected a low scoring game, and I just I don't know the Phils.
Look who's on the on deck. Look who's on deck. No,
that's what made it crazy. That's what made it insane. He was one of the best hitters in the game, for God's sake.
Hall of Famer, right? But you know what? You can play Monday morning quarterback, and that's what's fun about it. I mean, to that game and what Malk did, but that game in L.A. that I talked about where Willie Davis stole home, he was on second base, and Jack Balshin is a pitcher. He was the Phillies' best reliever at that time, and Balshin wild pitched him the third. So Malk comes out and makes a change, and he brings in
Maurice Stevens.
Right? Brought in Maurice Stevens,
rookie.
But if Balshin, if whoever the catcher was, I'm not sure if it was Darryl Beltran, if he stops that ball, knocks it down, and Davis doesn't get the third, obviously he can't steal home. So one little play, and the Phillies lost that game because Davis stole home. That was the 16th inning.
Yeah,
and it's just amazing. And you can go back and nitpick at so many different things. And if something had changed, the Phillies would have won the pennant. And they probably are talked about more since they didn't win the pennant than if they won the pennant.
That's the irony of it. This team is so beloved because they didn't win it. I mean, had they won it and didn't make a great showing in the World Series, would we think of them like like the 83 team or the 93 team is set apart because there were such a bunch of characters on there.
And worst to first too. Yeah.
Right. But, it's
there's so many games in that streak. I was just looking this one up too. In game 6 was probably the game that they should have nailed down.
Terrible,
they had a 4-0 lead early and going into the fifth inning, and Malk made his share of mistakes. There's no question. He had Bobby Shanson there facing Rico Cardi, bases loaded, and Balshin was gassed. He could not pitch, but he did have Ed Roebuck, and Ed Roebuck was a good relief pitcher for the Phillies that year, and he let Bobby Shantz, talk about a guy being gassed, Bobby Shantz was out of it, but you don't leave a left-hander in to face Rico Cardi, who was a tremendous hitter.
The bases loaded.
Played a 3-run triple, and Philly
bases loaded. That ball, that rocketed around the, and that was the game. And that was the game. And that was Mahaffey. Mahaffey pitched another real good game, and he didn't get the credit. And that's one thing I'm a big Malk defender. I'll defend him because every manager makes mistakes, and when the old saying, when the players hit and do everything right, the manager looks like a genius. But if the pinch hitter comes up and strikes out, the manager's an idiot. So, Gene, he made his share of mistakes, granted. But that one, that bringing Bobby Shanson to face Rico Cardi, wow. And then not give it, I thought Mahaffey should have gotten at least one more start in the streak.
Yeah, Mahaffey was the loser in that 1-0 game. Pitched a great game, lost 1-0. the infamous Chico Ruiz game. But
There's-
one thing we probably should do is, as much as we anguish 60 years later over the 64 Phillies, we should probably salute the Cardinals as hard as that is.
Absolutely.
The Cardinals were buried. They were in 8th place late in that year. And then they picked up Lou Brock, one of the greatest trades in baseball history. And they picked up Brock in June. They were in 8th place in mid-June.
Yep.
For Ernie Broglio.
Ernie Broglio.
And Lou Brock turned into a superstar, a Hall of Famer. And I think they won maybe 10 of the last 13, something like that.
They went on a hot streak while the Phils went cold. And that's what, and that's what I tell people who want to blame Mark. I said, give the Cardinals a little bit of credit here. They got hot at the right time. And of course they played the Phils those three games and just beat the living,
I was at. I remember. Were any of you guys at any of the games during the 10-game losing streak? Do you remember?
No.
I was at loss number 7. It was a Sunday afternoon.
That Sunday game, they got shelled.
Sonny Callison hit 3 home runs.
3 home runs, yeah.
And the Phillies got killed, 14-8. And I remember
Bunning got killed. Bunning was the starter. He got killed.
Bunning gave up 7 runs in 3 innings in that game, and I remember walking off the field. Back then, I don't know if you guys remember, on Sunday afternoons, I think on Saturday afternoons as well, you could walk on the field after the game and exit out through the bullpen in right field. So I remember we hopped over
Sam, every game was like that.
I think every game was like that, Sam, because I remember doing that.
Really? I thought it was just weekends. Okay.
Yeah.
My father took me to games, and they were mostly all midweek. And they were never on weekends because my dad loved the twilight doubleheaders.
Oh, it started at 6 o'clock. Yep.
Yeah, and then you get like halfway of the first game, and then you'd have a complete game. So my first experience at Connie Mack was a double header with the Cardinals, and Stan Musial was still playing. So that was my first experience. But I have to say something, guys. We've been talking about the demise of the team. Let's relive some of the highlights of that team, starting out with a couple little minutes here, but I watched it live. So let's relive this.
Last of the 9th inning. It's a perfect game going for Jim Bunning. The batter is Charlie Smith, and here we go. Foul ball, back out of play, and the count strike 1. The slender father of 7 here on Father's Day in 8 innings has retired 24 straight men. In his quest of a baseball dream, a perfect game. This crowd is absolutely holding its breath. High pop fly. This one is playable. The shortstop, Bobby Wine, is in foul ground. 1 out. Now George Altman is coming out. George Altman is coming out to bat for Amato Samuel. Real good left-hand hitter is being set up now, and Bunning is really going to have to earn it. He has retired 25 straight. High fly ball. It might go foul. It is going foul. Callison coming over, may or may not, and he does not have a play. It's in the crowd. 1 strike to count on George Altman. 1 away. We're in the last of the 9th, and another left-hand hitter, number 49, John Stevenson, is now in the on-deck circle to bat for Tommy Sturdivant. So if Bunning is to do it, he's got to finish out against 2 left-hand hitters. Foul out of play. It's strike 2. A good breaking pitch that was in on him. Not since 1880 in the National League, not since 1922 in the regular season. In 56, Don Larson wrote the history of the game of the perfect game of the World Series. Here is Jim Bunning with 1 man out in the last of the 9th inning. 2 strikes to count. Struck him out. Jim Bunning is 1 out from a perfect ball game.
this crowd is right on the edge of their seats. If he gets Johnny Stevenson, you'll hear the roar go up. Looks in for his sign. 2 outs and nobody on. He's retired 26 in a row. Strike one. Every pitch bringing a roar from the Shea Stadium crowd to a man there behind Jim Bunning. They're Mets fans, but they appreciate a great performance. One strike to count. Strike two. You can never possibly come any closer and not get it. Jim Bunning is now 1 strike from a perfect ball game. How do you stay cool and how do you stay poised in a spot like this? The crowd is standing. To a man they're standing. Here's the pitch. Strike out! Perfect game! A perfect game for Jim Bunning. Here come his teammates. Oh, what a happy scene for the Phils and Jim Bunning.
Amazing.
Well, I know that was a little longer than I wanted to, but you couldn't really fast forward with what I have. But it gives you the feel of 1964, black and white TV. Now, that's Bob Murphy out of New York.
Right.
They didn't have videotape back then. Channel 6, I watched the game, but there was no record of it. A thing called Kinescope kept that they were able to do that. So just with the technology of 60 years ago to now, that's what that flavor, but that sealed my love for the team and baseball. And we could discuss that a little bit, but then a little bit after that, 3 weeks later, another Philly makes history. So I'll just play it till we can talk about it, but it's only 30.
And John Callison, the left-hand batter against right-hander Dick Raddatz. Swing, and there it goes, a long high drive, deep to right field. It is going. Home run for Callison, and the National League wins 7-4. John Callison hitting the first pitch from Dick Raddatz, lines it into the stands in right field. And the final score, the National League 7, the American League 4.
Well, that did it for me.
That's the one that gives me the chills. That one, because I was such a Johnny fan. I still, to this day, cracks me when they say to people, well, who's your favorite player? And then they list 5 people. Well, no. The question was, who's your favorite player, not your top 5. And to me, there's Johnny, and then, everybody else. I mean, he was, God.
Yeah, Tony Gonzalez was my guy. It's funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love him. He started out as number 22. I could tell you a lot of facts from Havana, Cuba. Started out as number 22, then became 25, and had that inside-out swing. Came up as a power hitter, and then had back surgery, and then had to change his whole hitting approach, and became a line drive gaps hitter, and finished second in the
67
batting rates. Hit 339. Clemente hit 357. Then
back in the day, as kids, we all had our favorite players. So, So my best friend growing up went on to infamy in the stock and security industry. He was making a ton of money at one time as an analyst, and so growing up, his favorite player was Tony Gonzalez. And
Little Dynamite was his nickname because he was a power hitter in a little package. But I tell you what, when you see Bunning's perfect game, and then you see Callison home run, you thought the Phillies were a team of destiny that year. This is a Philadelphia year, and good things happen in 3. The next thing is getting to the series. Yep.
Look at the situation there. How within 3 weeks, technically a visiting team, and then 3 weeks later, a Phillies player. They call it a walk-off home run now.
Yeah, now it's a walk-off. When Shea Stadium closed and they had all these, tributes to it, I saw something, and they went through the highlights of Shea Stadium in the history. And those two events were listed in the highlights of Shea Stadium. 2 events by out-of-town ball players, were the part of the highlights of Shea. But they had
a big event that overshadowed that in '69, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. I think that one was the top.
And Sam, just look at the irony. The 2 teams that played at Shea both beat teams for championships from Baltimore. Remember, they won the World Series against Baltimore, and then the Jets won the Super Bowl for the AFL team against the Colts.
That basically caused the merger of the NFL AFL.
Carl comes up with, look at that, Carl. You really, that's a
piece staying up at night. That's a good one. I like
really.
Well, I got the podcast bug, so I'm thinking about more things for other podcasts. Now,
can I go back to one thing I wanted to say? We were talking about, before I forget, we were talking about exiting Connie Mack, and you guys said you both did, even during the week. Well, this was game 7 of the losing streak. I remember walking out. They lost to the Braves 14-8. Callison had 3 homers, and they still got creamed. But the fans in line as they were walking out, and I'm just mentioning this in case somebody on your Facebook page was part of that group, they all started chanting, "Phillies on the warpath." Ooh, ooh. I don't know why. I'm a 9-year-old kid, but they're playing the Braves, so I guess warpath and Braves. But has goofy things stick in your mind? That sticks in my mind from that game.
Well, here's something Bill Campbell told me, and I don't know, maybe he told you this, but he told me, of course, he knew everybody. He knew, and he said when the Braves came to town, Bobby Bragan, their manager, had said to them, let's treat this like it's the World Series, because to a man, they didn't like Mock. And and Bobby, I mean, look, your managers always are playing to win, but sometimes they're making moves, in games that don't matter so much, and that's what Bill told me. And I don't know the people. I don't know enough people to talk to anybody to verify it, but I'm sure.
I can definitely see that. I mean, we've all. Yeah. I remember playing in high school, and there was a manager on another team who overmanaged and yelled at his kids all the time, and we couldn't stand him. So we wanted to beat that team more than anybody. I won't mention any names, but so I can see it, especially on a higher level, and the passion that Mock created for his team. It probably turned other teams against him because, like you said, he did everything. I remember when he punched Jerry Grody. Have you guys talked about that?
Yeah,
Jerry Grody.
Did he punch? I mean, I don't know if
Jerry Grody was a catcher for the Houston Colt 45s back then.
It was July 4th, 1966. It was
good.
Bill, and I, how I know this so well, because Bill White. I talked to Bill White about it. And Bill White, I was talking to him, and he says, I think I was at bat at that point. And he says, I hit a foul pop, and then he says, I got a reprieve, but I struck out anyway.
Oh, I didn't know that. But there was a foul ball, for fans who don't know, went into the dugout. Jerry Grody went to catch it. He's the catcher. And Walk just cold-cocked him. And he didn't catch the ball. And the next day, Major League Baseball had to put a rule in, because up to then, players were not allowed in your dugout.
Right. He knew he'd get away with it. Yep,
he got away with it. The next day, they put a rule in, and they amended it. That's why other teams did not like Mock.
I didn't play this the last time, but I think Sam, I'm sure you knew Stan Hochman, iconic sports writer. But here's a little minute and something about Gene.
Gene Mock was the slickest manager I've ever encountered, and knew more baseball, more inside baseball, and didn't mind cheating, but for the most part found out things by hanging around the batting cage watching the other team hit. Now, that was not ethical. Other managers didn't lurk around the batting cage to see if Ernie Banks was standing off the plate, or as close to the plate. But he did until Leo DeRocha came to town, and Leo started hitting fungos off the back of Gene's legs until he stopped. And at that point, Mock stopped watching the visiting team. He once told us that Julian Javier would strike out 3 times because they were going to throw him 9 curveballs that day. I think he hoped we would run to Javier and say, Mock says they're going to strike you out. We didn't, but sure enough, they threw him 9 curveballs and he struck out 3 times. He did smart things. He realized that the Phillies bullpen was in left field, and that was not a good place at Connie Mack Stadium. He couldn't observe it without stepping up to the top step, whereas if he moved them to right field, he could watch what was happening, and if a ball was hit off the right field fence there at Connie Mack Stadium, the bullpen coach, Bob Olders, could wave a towel so that the runner on first would know it's a good idea to go first to third. He might have won a handful of games that way with just something as slick as that.
That's beautiful. That's great.
Yeah.
That encapsulates things. That's a name from the past, Bob Oldus. Yeah.
I didn't know about that. They actually moved the bullpens
Yeah.
from left field to right field. I didn't know that.
I've talked to Bob Oldus. What an old baseball guy that is. I mean, man, oh man. And he told me all about that. How he'd wave that flag and wave the towel, the white towel, and for runner, because otherwise,
I do remember that now. Yeah, I totally forgot about it.
Oh yeah, no, he, going back to Mock, we were talking about how the teams tried to play so hard against him. When they had that last weekend in Cincinnati in '64, Freddie Hutchinson, the manager of the Reds, I mean, the guy was dying. I don't know how long he lived after the season, but wasn't very long. He actually came to the stadium, came to Old Crosley Field to see Mock and to whatever they talked about. I don't know if it's been recorded anywhere, but he made a special trip to come and, pay his respects to Mock for what had happened. And then a few months later, Freddie wasn't around. But that shows you, the general respect that his contemporaries had for him. They knew they were up for a fight if they were playing the Phillies and Mock.
In 2014, I wrote a story because it was the 50th anniversary at that time of the '64 Phillies, and I wrote a story. And for 50 years, the premise basically is that Mock blew the pennant.
Right.
He overused Chris Short and Jim Bunning. He pitched them 6 times in the 10-game losing streak. He used them 5 times combined on 2 days rest. So for those who don't know, that's the math, and that's true. And yes, it played a big part in the Phillies' collapse because Mock didn't trust a young Rick Wise. Ray Culp, there's conflicting reports on whether he was injured. Stan Hockman said he was not injured, that Mock just didn't trust him. But anyway, in 2014, I talked to a lot of the players, and the players disagreed. Majority of the players disagreed with that theory that Mock blew the pennant, and they said the reason they lost was simple. Frank Thomas broke his finger sliding into second base right before the 10-game losing streak started, and the Phillies lineup didn't have enough power to withstand that injury. Now, Thomas, for those who don't recall, came over in a late-season trade from the Mets. He had 26 RBIs and 7 home runs in his first 34 games with the Phillies. I mean, this guy looked like a Hall of Famer. He was pushing the ball. He was the missing piece. And when he broke his thumb on September 8th, they had a 6.5-game lead. And shortly thereafter, the 10-game losing streak started. He came back against doctor's orders and played in the middle of that losing streak or early in the losing streak. But he shouldn't have played. He went 2 for 13 with no RBIs. So anyway, the majority of the players I spoke to in 2014 said that it wasn't Mock. The bottom line is the injury to Frank Thomas killed him. And I think that's kind of forgotten when you talk about that season, the injury to Frank Thomas, who was really needed. I think the Phillies used 7 or 8 first basemen that year, and he was finally the guy that used Vic Powers and Costin Shockley and Johnny Hernstein and Danny Cater. You can go on and on, but he was the guy that really solidified them. And he broke his finger at second base. From basically,
yeah.
After their season just spiraled out of control.
You talk to people, and I've talked to people and people in the group, and there are people who absolutely are convinced that the only two pitchers that pitched in that 10-game streak were Bunning and Short. So I say to them, well, if that's the case, you remember game one? Yeah, sure, game one, the stolen Chico Ruiz. I said, well, who was on the mound in game one? Oh, Mahaffey. I said, well, there's one. There's one right there. Mahaffey pitched another game. We talked about that earlier. And Dennis Bennett pitched 2 games. I mean, that guy must have had the heart of a warrior. He pitched that game. I think it was game 9
he was injured, Bennett. Right.
He had nothing left. He had absolutely nothing left. But that's the thing. And it's funny. They went into the season not realizing what a gaping hole they were going to have at first, because in '63, Roy Sievers had a pretty good year. And he just, 2 guys that fell off they were old guys, baseball-wise, that they, I think we're counting on that both had good years in '63, Roy Sievers and Cal McClish, the pitcher. And but the gap, Sievers was just done. He just had nothing left, and, he was out of baseball, by the end of the year. But, and they just couldn't find a replacement. They, until, and I read that they wanted to get Thomas earlier. He was on their radar. They really wanted him, and the Mets just wouldn't give him up. And
one of the things I think Malk should have done is trusted Rick Wise a little more. Now, Wise just turned 19, and I think in hindsight, it's easy, but I think he should have given Wise a start. And Wise even said this years later, because I talked to him about it. He said he could have used me as fodder, but at least it would have given Short and Bunning another day's rest. And he said, to tell you the truth, I was real confident too. I was cocky. I was only 19. And I think he ended up 5-3 or something that year. Wise was not, your typical teenager. He followed up Bunning's perfect game, as with the first game, and pitched great. Didn't give up a hit, I think, to the 5th inning of that game. So Wise is a guy that, not many people talk about that. They talk about Culp and Bunning and Mahaffey and not using them. But at some point, I wish he would have trusted Rick Wise, who obviously had a very good career. But he didn't,
do you have contacts with Rick? Do you have any?
I haven't talked to him probably since that 2014. I do have a contact, but
we'd like to try to get some players on.
Great gentleman, great guy, and haven't talked to him in 10 years.
I'm going to reach out to Bob Oldest, but you talk about the players not blaming Malk. I was looking at something the other day about Johnny Briggs. He's one of there aren't too many of them around, and I was looking at Johnny Briggs, and right in the middle of they did the I guess it was the Saber biography of him. Says it right in there. Never blamed Malk. He always thought that it wasn't Malk's fault. And there's a guy, he's a rookie. He doesn't know any better. He really didn't know any better. And he said Malk always treated him well. I'd like to try and get him on as well.
Last time I talked to him, he was working for the Patterson Recreation Department. He's from Patterson, New Jersey.
Yeah, he went back.
Again, this is a while ago. So
he had a nice career.
He did. He played with the Brewers later on, and the Phillies had some rookies during that time that came up: Alex Johnson and Danny Cater and Briggs and Rick Wise and.
I thought they made a mistake trading Cater. Cater went on to have a nice career, and they got Ray Herbert for him.
Yeah, that was Malk did panic. They traded Adolfo Phillips, Fergie Jenkins, of course, for Johnny Hernstein, for Bob Buell and Larry Jackson. You
The
know,
worst
I'm one
trade
of
ever.
the few guys that
for
defends that
Jenkins.
trade. I defend that trade because, you know, you go into the season. A lot of people were picking them to win it in '66. Larry Jackson was a workhorse. I mean, look at that staff they had: Bunning, Short, and Larry Jackson. Between the three of them, they had like probably 750 innings.
and then they all have Medicare cards. Come on.
Yeah, well, but you know, nobody knew what Ferguson Jenkins was
Well,
going to do.
my argument is they should have known. You know, the scouting department should have known. I mean,
but
Fergie.
you don't know what's going to happen. Look at the kid they traded. The two examples. Look, they traded Drabeck's kid. What was his name?
Who's that?
Kyle Drabeck's kid, who they traded to for
Right.
Holiday, and he got hurt. He was
Doug Drabeck's kid, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Doug Drabeck's. It was Kyle Drabeck, I guess. His name.
Right.
He was a can't miss. He was an untouchable. Now, and look what happened to him. The other example is the kid they traded to the Marlins for JT Realmuto. What's his name? Sixto, or I forget. I want to say Sixto Lezcano, but it's not him.
The pitcher, I know who you mean.
Yeah, the pitcher. He came in. He started out great, and he's had arm trouble. So you just don't know you don't know what's going to happen with the prospects, and I don't know, how do you predict the guy's going to be a Hall of Famer? So they were trying to win the pennant that year, and do I get grief? People think I'm crazy when I defend that trade, but I look at it in the context of the time that it was made. Now I'm not going to defend. What's his name, Sandberg, for Ivan De Jesus. That one I won't defend because
guys, I do want to mention that I know we're talking. I don't know, not in that, but it's just like the disappointment that they didn't win. But I think, there's a lot of people that probably watch this, and then once it's in the archives, we're at this certain age where we experienced it. But then for some younger people we hope to get some younger people, and I apologize for forgetting to put our little ticker on here till almost towards the end. But here's about a little 2 minute and something encapsulating the good part of that whole season with the voice of God, as Steve Sable mentioned at one time a little bit. So I'm just play this a little bit to give a flavor of the whole season, and we could kind of almost wrap up a little bit towards the end. I want to play this.
He struck him out. Jim Bunning has pitched a perfect game.
In the summer of '64, everything seemed perfect for the Phillies. For more than 4 months, first place belonged to Gene Mock's men, and their relentless drive to the pennant was led by a 22-year-old rookie whom they called Richie Allen, the best young player to come into the National League in years. Though he made 41 errors at third base and led the league in strikeouts, Allen was an awesome talent with boundless potential. But the Phillies' top long ball threat was left-hander Johnny Callison, who won the '64 All-Star game with a shocking 2-on, 2-out homer in the bottom of the ninth. It seemed there was simply no denying this team. With just a dozen games to play, the Phils held a cozy 6.5 game lead, and the champagne was on ice. But the next sound we heard was a thunderous crash. The Phillies embarked on a 10-game losing streak that wiped away their lead and still stands as one of the greatest collapses in baseball history.
It's almost incredible. Here was
Well, I figured that give, the voice of God that, John Facenda, who was part of NFL Films, we all know him back at the Channel 10 days, but for him to narrate that a little bit before it got bad. I just noticed they said Richie Allen had 41
That's
errors
right.
at
That's right.
base.
41 errers.
Oh, my
41
God.
errors.
Yeah, he was playing a new position, and he was an outfielder, and it was tough. He had to adapt to it, and later on he moved to first base, and was a little bit better at first, but luckily, the rest of the infield was great. Tony Taylor was a great fielder. Wine and Amaro were Gold Glove caliber players. Gonzalez and Callison were great in the left and right field, and Dalrymple was solid defensively. But yeah, Allen was a problem fielding wise at third.
In '63, they went out and got Don Hoke. Remember him?
I do. And
he was a big bust. He just was a big bust. And that was another thing. They put Don Demeter at third in '63. But then, of course, if you kept Don Demeter, you don't have Jim Bunning. But, it took guts to put somebody he'd never played the position. But Mark figured he's such a great athlete and must have had a great attitude to do it. I mean, had to be frustrating over there. They said most of the errors were on throws. I don't really remember, but he
throws, and I remember some ground balls that he booted, but but he made up for it with his.
He made up for it.
And he was a clutch hitter too.
I mean, 41 errors. You think about that; it's like one every 4 games. A lot of.
And it's a shame. My dad took me to the games, and he loved baseball. He loved the Phillies. Actually, he was an A's fan. He wishes the Phillies left, not the A's, but that's another story for another day. But the short.
We should also mention though that Richie Allen, his OPS, which blows my mind, for the whole decade, he was better than Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, anybody.
Yeah.
And I never really thought that Allen, to be honest with you, was a Hall of Famer.
I didn't either. I agree with you.
Yeah, but when I heard that stat, it made me sit back and say, "Wow, he was better than me."
I've completely come around on that. I didn't think he was either. I thought he didn't do it long enough in his numbers, but
right. Of course, he won an MVP with the White Sox and was Rookie of the Year with the Phillies. But I'm on the fence. He's borderline to me, but that stat really is a great one, and it shows you how great a hitter he was.
You know what? You've probably met him more times than I. What a gracious, nice man he was. I couldn't get over that. I mean, I was at an event, a Phillies event, and they were having a couple of guys signing, and he was with Gary Maddox, who everybody thinks is, universally such a great guy. Gary Maddox was just like sullen. He didn't, really give you stop and talk to Dick Allen. Man, oh man, that guy gave you the time. He was unbelievable. And then I saw him again at Johnny Callison's memorial, and it was like, we were best friends. He was such a nice, warm man.
First time I talked to him, when did he come back? In 75, I believe?
75, yeah.
75, and I was working for a little weekly paper called the Record Breeze.
I was at that game at the.
I remember the Record Breeze, yeah.
Yeah, and I came back, and Richie came back, and I went to the dugout and talked to him, and all he wanted to do was talk about his bad experiences in Little Rock. And because Little Rock was the Phillies minor league team,
right?
And and this happened in the early '60s. And to be honest, I was taken aback, and I'm thinking, this happened. This is ancient history. I'm surprised you didn't get past it. And then later on, I thought, wow, that was selfish of me to think like that. I didn't have to go through what he went through, and he went through racial insults, and it was a war there if you're a black player in Arkansas in the early '60s. And
that was, that was cruel what they did to him.
It really was, and I can totally understand as I step back. But that was my first reaction. I remember thinking, "Why are you talking about this? This is ancient history."
Yeah.
And then we talked about being back and how he's different from his first time in Philadelphia and that kind of thing. But
he came back.
You really got to take that. You got to take that in consideration. When you think of his first year, we talk about the 41 errors coming up here to Philadelphia, all the pressure on him and not being accepted, and tip of the cap to Richie Allen for all he went through.
One Richie Allen memory, and it's one of the earliest. We're coming up on the anniversary of the season starting. And they played a preseason game. People always think, oh, no, that wasn't a preseason. That was the JBF game. No, they played a preseason game against the Orioles on a Sunday afternoon right before the season started. Robin Roberts was pitching for the Orioles. First time he faced Richie, he hit a bomb like over the left field roof and on all the signs. And I just remember, I wish I could remember whether it was Bill or Sam doing the call, but they were just amazed. Like, oh my God, where did this guy just hit that ball? And then, but they both said, I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of these.
Yeah, they were right.
And the 40-ounce bat.
And when I met Robin Roberts, and I said, my first memory, that was my first memory of Richie Allen. He said to me, yeah, you don't remember I struck him out the next time I faced him, do you?
I love Robbie. What a classy guy he was.
Yeah, I just, met him as a fan a few times, but, it's
I remember talking.
You've had a great life, Sam.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've talked to a lot of these guys. And Robbie, I remember talking to him. Do you remember a pitcher the Phillies had named Wayne Gomes?
Sure,
he was a first-round pick out of Old Dominion. Yeah. And they were introducing him because they just drafted him and they brought him into Vet Stadium. And Robin Roberts was there for some reason. It was some kind of event that weekend, and they were honoring some of the old-time Phillies. And so I went over to talk to Wayne Gomes. It just happened to be covering that day and get a chance to talk to him. He played at Old Dominion in Virginia. And I said, what was it like to talk to Robin Roberts and to be here with Robin Roberts? And he turned to me and he said, yeah, who is he? And I just stopped in my tracks. I said, oh, he was a great pitcher with the Phillies and he was a Hall of Famer. And I walked away thinking, oh my God, these guys just don't know history. And then I thought about it after a while. And I thought, well, he's from Virginia. They didn't really have a pro team there, pro baseball team. Maybe he didn't follow baseball, but it just stuck with me that he did not know who Robin Roberts was. And to us, I never saw him pitch. I was too young. I never saw him pitch for the Phillies. I'm like you, Steve. I saw him pitch for the Orioles.
I saw him on TV, but I never saw him
with Houston, I believe, at the end of his career.
Houston.
But I would say people our age think we have seen it all, but the younger generation, I have to give one quick about, the sport that we all love, hockey. Now, about 12 years ago, I used to do fan photo at the old center, and they were doing some kind of promotion with Kelly and Bernie and Dorney and all them. And then Bernie was the main crux of this, whatever this was. And there's all young kids around and people working there for the first time. And Bernie had the beard then, and they were going, who's that old guy? And I go, are you out of your mind? So we're there, and I point up to the number 1 banner up on the arena. I said, well, that's the guy who won the Stanley Cup for the Flyers 74-75. I know, Steve, this is dedicated to your page, but I know with Sam and I's background with having our college radio show back on Sunday nights, but it became out of hockey. And then me and myself and my cousin Vince were 3 of the lucky 17,007 that were there May 19th, 1974. And Sam and I and maybe a couple other people hope within a month we could do another podcast about, the 50 years of the Flyers. So that's coming up. But Steve, I think this really does have legs. And, we're at the hour, and I don't think we even brushed the surface on this right now.
Sam, you'll be back. We'll get you, loosen up that schedule, and we'll get you back in here.
Steve, if you want, I can throw out a trivia question, and they can. I'll be happy to mail a Bill Campbell book. And the best thing about I
already have it. I've got the Bill Campbell.
No, not to you. I mean to somebody answers on your Facebook page. So, yeah, who was Tony in Jim Bunning's Perfect Game? Tony Taylor robbed somebody of a base hit.
That's an easy one.
It's an easy one for us, but. And the first one, they get that on your Facebook page. I'll tell them to put their address. I'll be happy to give them a Bill Campbell book. The best thing about the Bill Campbell book is it has a CD in it of his best calls. And it's got him describing a Richie Allen home run, a transcontinental blast. And he's got the Wilkes.
I remember that. That's the one I love the most.
I meant the what's his name? Joe Conklin doing Bill.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. Bill Camel had to go to a wedding. We were doing book signings when the book
One
came out.
more thing to say before you finish that. I got one more story that.
Okay, well, Bill Camel and I were doing a lot of book signings in New Jersey and the Philadelphia area, and Bill had to go to a wedding, and so I called up Joe Conklin. I said, Joe, would you mind sitting in? Since everybody knows you as Bill Camel, with your impressions. He said, "Oh, I love it." So he came over, and we actually had a TV crew there, and it was great. Joe had a ball, and Joe and Bill are real close. At first, Bill was a little annoyed because he thought that Conklin, when he was impersonating him, was kind of mocking him. And his daughter said to him, "Look, flattery is the best form of flattery. Impersonating you is the best form of flattery." And Bill took it a different way, and then he started to listen to him, and he said, "Hey, he's introducing me to a younger generation." So he loved it. They became good friends. They'd go to dinner together, and Joe's the best.
You heard what Joe Conklin said this year at the Sports Writers Dinner about Dick Vermeil.
Which one? I was there, of course. But
yeah, you were there. He said when he was doing Dick Vermeil didn't like it. And, But anyway, talking about Bill, well, first of all, that's on you and I.
He's the one.
When you were doing the Adam Talaferro book. That's how you and I met.
Okay.
My son graduated, went all through school with Adam. And we went over to see, and that's where you and I met. But, we talked so much about Jim Bunning's perfect game. It was really sad that Bill couldn't call that game because it was his stepmom's funeral that weekend. And,
Sam, let me ask you something about, I saw online, doing prep for this show, that it was just audio, but in the late 70s, 77, 78, it's Bill just talking. And then the two regrets that he was, it's a shame I don't have the exact quote, that the two jobs, like the Phillies and he was with the Sixers when they're 9-72. Was there? I know with the book, did he have regrets? Because I know when he was no longer the Phillies announcer, we all know when they moved to the vet, and he was talking about the possible not having the proper sponsor, why they dropped him for Harry. Is there a truth to that?
Truth to what? I lost.
That Bill actually had regrets working for the Phillies.
Oh no, not at all. He loved that job, and he loved baseball, and he actually, people forget, later on he did a year for the Pittsburgh Pirates with Bob
I didn't
Prince.
remember that.
That I don't know.
Yeah. He loved baseball, and Bill Campbell was with the Phillies. And
the guy on the left,
the Phillies with Bysom and Rich Ashburn, and he took Whitey under his wings and taught Whitey. And I've talked to Ashburn about this, and he says probably the best thing Bill told me was that if you don't have much to say, don't say anything, because then when you say something, it's going to be more impactful. And if you listen to Ashburn, you listen to an old broadcast, Ashburn doesn't talk that much. But when he does, that dry sense of humor, he hits a home run. He puts everything in perspective, but he doesn't over talk. And he said, "I got that from Bill. Bill told me that." But
I learned baseball from those guys. They the things that they taught you, you just don't, they stay with you. We're pulling the infield in, when you got less than 2 outs late in the game. Pull the infield in and. Try to cut off the runs. I mean, just little things like that. They just taught you everything. They were.
Sam, you remember Ray Scott? You remember Ray Scott,
Sure.
the national?
He was the Green Bay game, yeah.
He was the epitome of not saying much. Especially with the Packers back in the day. Dowler, Star,
right,
Warning, and let the camera do everything else. And he was the epitome of an announcer that didn't say as much as he needed to.
I used to like Bill Camel when say, the quarterback's dropping back, Norm Snead looking. In other words, he's looking for a receiver. But he told me it gave him time to register what was going on. As he's saying that, he's looking around and checking. And I've talked to Merrill Reese. And Merrill Reese, you listen to Merrill Reese now, he uses the exact same thing. And he says he got it from Bill Campbell. So it's just kind of neat how these things are passed on. But getting back to Bill, when he was fired by the Phillies, they told him they were moving to a new stadium from Connie Mack to the Vet, and they told him that they were going to get a new sponsor. They're going from Ballantyne to Schmitz, and they said that Schmitz thought he was too identified with Ballantyne beer, and that's why they wanted to get rid of him. That was a bunch of bull. That was not true, because in fact, I have it in my office. I have a poster. It's a Ballantyne poster, and who's on it? Bill, Richie, and By. All three of them were tied into Ballantyne. So that was just an excuse. Bill Giles, who's a great man, and I really respect him, was good friends with Harry when they worked in Houston. He wanted to bring Harry over. And I talked to Harry about this for the book. Harry said when he was hired, he assumed that Bill Campbell was part of the team and they were going to be a foursome. It was going to all four of them. He had no idea. And when he found out Bill was getting fired, he felt terrible, told Bill about it, and said, I am so sorry. I had no idea. And Bill really appreciated that. And he and Harry became very good friends. They would go to dinner or lunch together. And later on, they did some Big Five games together. So really classy gentlemen. But the Philly story was not true, that they were getting rid of him because he was too close to the previous beer sponsor. All three announcers were tied into them, and they just wanted to get Harry here. And Harry was tremendous, and Bill was tremendous too. But people always talk about the chemistry Harry and Rich Ashburn had, and they did have impeccable chemistry. But Bill and Rich also had that. I mean, they were such a great team. I mean, I love listening to old broadcasts, and you can hear them, and they just clicked, as did Harry and Whitey years later. We're very blessed in Philadelphia to have some great broadcasts.
Wasn't Ashburn? He loved pizza, and they used to bring pizza up to Connie Mack Stadium, and then they said, "Well, you can't say the name of the pizza place."
Right.
And he goes, "Yes," and something about our friends. Sausage and pepperoni.
Celebrate twins.
Yes.
I asked Rob Thompson. Rob Thompson lives at Packer Park, he told me. And he said the only thing, he doesn't know where to get pizza. I said, what do you mean? You got Celebrays right there. He had hadn't heard of Celebrays.
I vote for Tacanelli's myself in Port Richmond. That's me.
Guys, do not talk about pizza. I'm in California. I have to travel far and wide to get a decent slice of pizza. They don't even know how to make a slice of pizza out here. That's another story for another day.
That's another. About food. We'll do another podcast on that, Carl. All right.
I know.
I guess
guys,
it's
I know we've been here over an hour. We could probably go for another 2. Why don't we just save it for another time? Sam, I certainly hope you will want to come back on other subjects.
Sure, anytime. And if somebody, just email me if somebody has the correct answer to that trivia question. I'll be happy to mail out a book.
All right, great.
There's a little job for you, Steve, to put that down there. So you can put that in the headline for this.
You know what? I'll put it in tonight. And or should I let them watch the podcast too?
I will air this probably sometime, maybe mid-morning, 9-10 o'clock tomorrow morning, because just to let you guys know, and Sam, that once we do end, just stay online. So this has to all download before I could move it anywhere. But anything in closing between you two guys, because I think this is great. And
no, it's just it's great to see Sam. It's always great to see Sam.
Great to see you guys. I had a lot of fun. I still have that. My wife calls me a pack rat, and that's one of the reasons I still have programs from that year, and I have the yearbook, and that was a second edition. As you guys remember.
I was just going to say that because right after the perfect game, they put a second edition into that. I had the original one for that, but yeah. Sorry, any little passing comments, with anything before we end this one and maybe schedule another one sometime?
I just want to say I don't want this to come out negative, because to me, the 64 Phillies really broadened my love and my knowledge of baseball as a 9-year-old and got me hooked on baseball. So even though they had the 10-game skid and that team broke our hearts, what a great year it was.
Me too.
So I just Want to end on a positive note. That's all.
Me too. And I thought, well, you know what? They finished so close. They're going to come back next year and win it. That's why I always was optimistic. But, you know, somebody said they wouldn't trade. They would trade the 2 World Series for the Phillies winning in '64. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's all positive, all positive. Great talking to both of you guys again.
Steve, let me bring this up to you because I mentioned this before you came on I know there's that about the Phillies collapse. It is not destroyed, but really the people in Philadelphia were really down hard, a whole generation. And I would say, well, I'm going to lead that to 10 years later to the Flyers winning the Cup in '74. There's something in my brain said, wait a second, there's something. The Sixers won the championship in '67, didn't that? Right. It's like, wait a second, no parade, no combat. And I think maybe that's another page for Facebook and another podcast. I would say, the forgotten championship. It's like,
yeah, and what a team that was. Wow.
Of course. My uncle, God bless him, he had tickets for that year. Now, it was the year before the Spectrum was finished, and they were at Convention Hall. But the Cincinnati was the first round with Oscar Robertson. And they played Boston at the Palestra because the circus was at Convention Hall. And now, years later, I realized what I watched in person, but didn't that help the city's citizenship of Philadelphia for sports?
Never thought about it. Never thought about it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that.
Just like that thing you never thought about something you mentioned. I never thought about that. It was so close in time.
Yeah, so I figured that's something maybe we could put together another Facebook page because this is '64, and I'm sure there's basketball, Philadelphia sports history, but I think we have something here, and then that'll lead to '74 when all hell broke loose when they won the Cup. I still wish I had the 8mm film I took because Sam, we're in Glassboro. I had the 8mm because I was in movie class. I have footage of Van Imp over there inside the building and running out, but I couldn't find it anymore in a couple of my moves. So, but anyway, that's something for down the road.
And how ironic is it that now this year's Flyers team is pulling a '64 Phillies?
Unbelievable.
As we talk here, they've lost 7 straight right at the end of the season, the worst possible time, and they're in trouble as far as getting into the playoffs.
I think from what some of the things I see with Twitter, it looks like he's going to have a stroke in some of these post-game.
Yeah.
You miss it, Sam, the day-to-day?
Pardon me?
You miss the day-to-day covering the team?
Flyers? Not really, because I'm so wrapped up. As you know, I'm doing it. We're putting together a TV series on the Broad Street Bullies, so we spend our days, writing episodes and our next step is to try to sell it to a network like HBO or Netflix. So I'm so wrapped up in that my day is very full. So I don't miss it. I still keep close tabs on them and still enjoy watching them, but I don't miss the day-to-day because my days are pretty filled up.
Well, Steve and I are really glad that you gave us some time for this miraculous hour, and hopefully we'll have some more time down the road for this. And
sounds good.
Yes. So, Steve, anything in closing? I know you're going to try to get the Callison family back on sometime.
Yeah, I'll be in touch. I'll be in touch with them, and we've got some other people, like I said, Chris Campbell, I think once we really pick up the steam, we'll have people calling us to come on.
Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? So, and that note, if we have anything else to say, hey, I'm going to thank everybody for coming out because this is going to air tomorrow, Wednesday. I forget what day it is. But till the next one, Sam, thank you so much. Steve will be talking soon.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
See you guys.
Thanks.